In this video, we'll look at 15 actors currently suffering. Beginning with, first up is Bruce Willis, who is suffering from the inability to remember, think, or make decisions. You see, action stars don't get bigger and mightier than Bruce Willis. This man has been in all the iconic movies that matter, like Pulp Fiction and the Die Hard franchise, and he even has a trio of solo albums to his name. Now, for the last few years, Willis has been starring in every movie he could and seemed unwilling to be picky, with critics joyfully savaging the quality of most of these movies. On movie sets, he would show up for a couple of days or so and go home with a $2 million paycheck, uncaring that so many of these movies would end up as direct-to-video stuff that no reputable critic would give a pass mark to. It soon emerged that rather than being unwise and greedy, he was rushing to provide for his family before he could no longer do so. Staff and fellow actors on the recent movie sets he was on soon came out with tales of Willis being confused on set, to the point where he couldn't understand why he was there in the first place. When he could function, he was unable to memorize his lines, and this had to be fed to him via earpieces. Stuff like that immensely tickled the curiosity of the public, and in March 2022, his family opted to put an end to speculations by announcing that he was retiring and had been diagnosed with aphasia, a disorder that comes from damage to those areas of the brain that controls speech and comprehension. Worse was to come, though, with Willis's family announcing in February 2023 that he had frontotemporal dementia, which is incurable, unstoppable, and, well, capable of causing severe changes in behavior. Be sure to stick to the end to see just why Morgan Freeman is currently suffering. If you thought that Bruce Willis story is pitiful, wait till you hear this next one. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on more videos. Next up is George Clooney, who lives with chronic pain, believe it or not. George Clooney is married to a very beautiful lady, richer than Croesus, and boasts an expansive real estate portfolio. He also had motorcycle accidents in September 2007 and July 2018. But in 2005, a stunt gone wrong during the shooting of Syriana led to Clooney falling from a chair he was tied to during a torture scene and hitting his head on the ground hard enough to damage his dura mater. The injury was so severe that his spine broke and cerebrospinal fluid was free to leak from his nose. Following the fall, Clooney was bedridden and in so much pain that he even thought of killing himself to make the pain go away. But he eventually had spinal surgery that mostly fixed the issue, but did not entirely remove the pain. His 2007 bike accident got his ribs broken and his flesh scraped, while the 2018 accident occurred in Sardinia when he was riding to a movie set, with Clooney hitting a car at 75 miles per hour and going over the roof of the automobile. He miraculously did not suffer major injuries from this particular accident and was quickly discharged from the hospital. But he lives a life of pain right now. Next up is Sarah Hyland, whose kidneys are failing. Sarah has had a quartet of Screen Actors Guild Awards, and no, she did not pick them up during a fire sale. This child star has had an extraordinary career, and there's every reason to applaud her successes in what is a very competitive field. Now, Sarah has had kidney dysplasia, which is a congenital condition that leads to the development of cyst-filled kidneys that fail more often than Chinese-made inverters. In April 2012, Sarah's situation got so bad that her dad donated one of his kidneys to her. That should have been the end of the problem, except that 4 years later, the donated kidney failed, and after what seemed like an eternity of thrice weekly dialysis, she got another kidney from her kid brother in September 2017. Normally, when you get a kidney or other organ from a donor, you are placed on anti-rejection medications and have to take them all your life to ensure that the donated organ does not get recognized by your body system as an alien and attacked. The anti-rejection medications that Sarah has been on for most of her life have made gaining muscle mass and weight hard for her. It also makes her so tired and cranky that it often affects her memory, to the point where she is unable to recall some of what happened on the Modern Family set. Apart from kidney issues, Sarah Hyland has battled with endometriosis, and since birth has gone through almost 20 surgical procedures to treat her health conditions and improve her quality of life. In December 2018, she confessed in an interview to having had thoughts of ending it all for being a burden to her family. The poor girl. Charmed Shannon Doherty is up next. Shannon has been in shows like Little House on the Prairie, plus Beverly Hills 90210 and its spin-offs, as well as movies like Girls Just Want to Have Fun and J.M. Silent Bob Strike Back. In 1999, she went public with the fact that she'd been diagnosed with Crohn's disease, and that's an inflammatory bowel disease that can lead to weight loss, bloating, and bowel obstruction, while dialing up colon cancer and small bowel cancer risks. But much worse was to come. In March 2015, she was diagnosed with breast cancer that had metastasized to her lymph nodes. Aggressive treatment that included mastectomy was initiated, and in April 2017, her cancer was deemed in remission. It seemed that she could finally breathe free, and she did that for a while, till her cancer made a comeback in 2019, in its stage 4 version, and spread all over her body. Shannon has always been open with the public about her health battles, and in October 2021, she uploaded photos on her Instagram page that showed the havoc that chemo had done to her body. Here's to hoping she beats this sea demon and can live the rest of her life free of pain and illness. Then comes Michael J. Fox. It grieves us to put the Back to the Future, Family Ties, Spin City, and The Good Wife actor in a video like this. And seeing him struggling to do stuff that most of us can do blindfolded sure is hard. This highly decorated actor has Parkinson's disease. And yeah, it was what Ali had, and it is always horrific to see a disease like that strip a man of his dignity. Parkinson's is incurable, and its progression cannot be halted. Victims have difficulty with movement, suffer behavioral changes and mental challenges, and eventually develop dementia. Michael J. Fox was diagnosed with the disease in 1991 when he was an incredibly young 29 years old. And this diagnosis terrified him so much that he effectively became an alcoholic who tried to forget with the help of drugs and alcohol. On set, he did his best to hold on to props to disguise the tremors that are an inevitable part of the disease. Eventually, he pulled himself together, stopped drinking, and in 1998 told the public what was up. Since then, he's been a strong advocate of increased research on Parkinson's disease, and he established a foundation for that very purpose that has raised a combined $1.5 billion for Parkinson's research. Still, a rather frank documentary about Michael that was directed by Davis Guggenheim will be out in May this year. The documentary takes viewers on a tour of Michael's day-to-day life, and one startling aspect was Michael J. Fox revealing that he falls often and even suffered injuries while the documentary was being filmed. Due to that and other reasons, he has to deal with a lot of pain. Seal is also in a lot of pain. Seal Henry Oluskan Olumide Adeola Samuel is a British singer and actor whose voice has made him famous for decades. He's sold over 20 million records, and his Kiss from a Rose is a classic. Voice apart, Seal is distinctive for his scarred face, which could almost be mistaken for souvenirs from a knife or sword fight, as was common in European military forces. He has since his early 20s suffered from discoid lupus erythematosus, which is an incurable autoimmune condition that causes painful inflammation on the cheeks, ears, and scalp, with eventual scarring in those locations. And no, he is not bald by choice, with the disease having stolen his hair. Discoid lupus erythematosus is easily treatable, but having it in the first place boasts aggressive skin cancer risks. Plus, the scarring that occurs and the odd looks and attention it attracts can cause low self-esteem and depression, with Seal once saying that his condition was initially traumatizing and made him self-conscious till he grew to accept himself as he was. Up next, we have Malcolm in the Middle star Frankie Muniz. This guy was born with a need for speed, and he has periodically put his acting career on hold so he could go fast in cars that look sleek enough to break the sound barrier. In 2009, he suffered a terrible crash at a race course that resulted in a broken back and injuries to his hands and feet. He also suffers terrible memory loss, which means that he cannot remember some of what happened on the Malcolm in the Middle set. and this has been explained as arising from a large number of concussions, 9 actually, that he suffered as a teen due to his being very active on the sports field. According to Muniz, his first concussion came at age 7 when he was the goalkeeper at a soccer game. For years, Muniz was misdiagnosed as suffering from mini strokes, with this being later found to be migraine auras. During these migraine auras, he cannot talk and cannot recognize faces, and has the worst kind of headache imaginable that feels like being stabbed in the head. Then we had Gary Busey. Gary got an Academy Award nod for his magnificent impersonation of Buddy Holly in The Buddy Holly Story, 1978, and he's also been in Lethal Weapon, 1987, and Under Siege, 1992. His life took a dramatic U-turn when, in 1988, he had an accident while out riding his motorcycle without a helmet and split his head wide open. He only barely survived the experience and suffered permanent brain damage. Following the crash and the brain damage that ensued, he became extremely impulsive and prone to acting in ways that others would find very objectionable. He soon became addicted to coke, suffering a nearly fatal overdose in 1995. And despite saying he's given up the drug, there's still evidence suggesting that's not the case. Gary filed for bankruptcy in 2012 and as of the present is worth around $500,000, with failed investments and medical bills accounting for a large part of his lost fortune. He was arrested in August last year at a Comic-Con in New Jersey and charged with a variety of sexual offenses and has yet to have his day in court. That same month, and about a day after his arrest at the Comic-Con, he was filmed apparently undressing and touching himself at a Californian park. And we can't help but wish that, just like in fairy tales, a talented singer like Selena Gomez would croon a healing song that would make him all right. And yes, Selena Gomez, who herself has significant health challenges, is next. Yes, the former child actor and later Tell Me Something I Don't Know and Kill Him With Kindness singer is not in the best of health and has suffered from lupus since around 2014. The autoimmune disease and the chemo needed to help control it destroyed her body to the point that her kidneys failed and she needed a transplant. This was carried out in 2017, with the kidney coming from a friend of hers. Lupus apart, she suffers from anxiety, depression, and is bipolar, while also catching COVID late last year. Selena has been very open about the impact of lupus on her mental and physical health. The medication she takes to keep the disease in check makes her susceptible to hand tremors and retaining water weight, with the latter making her a target for online trolls who mock her for being fat and who are willing to do whatever it takes to pull her down to their level. She copes by taking frequent social media breaks and reminding herself of the reasons she's on this planet. Alec Baldwin is next. Baldwin is just one of those guys who doesn't need to be introduced. He's done and seen it all, and critics have raved about his work more often than most of us have poured sinfully sweet caramel-flavored frappuccino down our throats this year. The Hunt for Red October actor has battled Lyme disease for almost 2 decades, and all that because multiple ticks took bites out of him over the course of a few years. His symptoms include cold sweats, joint pain, soreness, and exhaustion, and he gets them at the same time almost every year. Alec first mentioned his Lyme disease diagnosis during a 2011 interview with the New York Times, and in a 2011 interview with People magazine, he revealed the first time he experienced symptoms, it was so bad he thought he was going to die, and since he was freshly divorced at the time, he hoped that it wouldn't take too long for his corpse to be found. It must be noted that Lyme disease is treatable, but even with effective treatment, 10 to 20% of sufferers experience symptoms that linger for years. And unfortunately, Alec Baldwin is among the 10 to 20%. Then there is Anthony Anderson. Currently looks like he's training for an MMA career. Anderson has made his mark as the goofy guy on shows like Blackish and Guys with Kids, and has been in movies like The Departed, 2006, and Transformers, 2007. And just like 30 million Americans, he has type 2 diabetes and was diagnosed in 2001. This disease is often caused by obesity and lack of exercise, though genetics has some role to play. It's characterized by insulin resistance and high blood sugar, and if not properly managed, can lead to complications like stroke, diabetic retinopathy, and heart disease. And we are not suggesting that Anthony Anderson is even a little bit more special than the millions of Americans living with the disease. Anyway, when first diagnosed after going to his doctor with symptoms like excessive thirst and urination, Anderson did not take his sickness all that seriously and did what he had always done before his diagnosis. But then, around a decade later, his dad died from pulmonary embolism due to type 2 diabetes complications, and that was the wake-up call he needed. Anderson deals with his sickness by staying positive and has made lifestyle changes like eating healthier meals, working out at gyms, and eating complex carbs mainly in the morning so that they don't swamp his body at night. He's noticeably thinner and fitter these days, and while we miss seeing his dad bod, we feel better knowing that he's healthier and in a mentally better place. But then, Anthony Anderson's not the only celeb living with diabetes. Nick Jonas could write a book on that topic. Nick is primarily a singer, but he does have a very solid acting resume and is married to Priyanka Chopra, who happens to be one of the biggest Bollywood actresses on this merry planet. He was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was 13, and nearly 9% of the American population have the same illness. Last year, he posted a video on social media explaining that after suffering weight loss, excessive thirst, and other symptoms, he persuaded his parents to take him to a doc, and he was diagnosed shortly after. Type 1 diabetes occurs when the body attacks and kills the cells that produce insulin, with the result that the body can no longer make use of glucose to power itself. And just like in type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes, if not properly managed, comes with severe risks of complications like nerve damage, stroke, and heart disease. We won't say that Anderson and Nick should win the gold medal at the Suffering Olympics, but wealthy or not, his diabetes diagnosis impacts his life and that of millions of others, and will continue to do so till a cure is found for this horrible disease. Okay, it's time to talk about another Nick, and this one is often a loose cannon. Yeah, it's Nick Cannon time, and no, we are not going to talk about how he spent the last few years having kids with as many women as would consent. The sole reason that Nick Cannon is in this video is that he has lupus. He was hospitalized twice in early 2012 for kidney issues and a pulmonary embolism. But in March of that year, it was announced that his kidney issues were due to lupus nephritis. According to Nick, after his diagnosis, it was explained to him that lupus typically is not a life-threatening illness and can be successfully managed. He was told to eat well, get proper rest, and take good care of his body, and has undergone both chemotherapy and blood transfusions to keep the disease at bay. The commandment to take things slow meant he could no longer juggle multiple heavy projects at once, and has had to downsize and prioritize the most important. These days, he takes care of himself by exercising 5 days a week and eating the minimum amount of processed food, and he's now a passionate advocate of keeping folks educated and informed about lupus. We got Pete Davidson up next, and it is simply incredible all that he's achieved before the age of 30. Pete still looks like a teen, but managed to have Kim K to himself for almost a year, and was briefly engaged to Ariana Grande. He's also been a Saturday Night Live regular while starring in movies like Big Time Adolescence, 2018, and The King of Staten Island, 2020. Now, Davidson suffers from Crohn's disease and borderline personality disorder. He was diagnosed with Crohn's disease when he was 17 or 18 years old, and along with other drugs, smokes weed to deal with the pain and because it's fun. According to the fella, the disease makes his stomach tender and swollen, to the point where he was unable to eat. In an interview with High Times, he credits marijuana as being the only thing that enabled him to function at anything approaching normal level. He said, "Weed would be the only thing that would help me eat. I wouldn't be able to perform on SNL if I didn't smoke weed." Then there is Morgan Freeman. For sure, he's one of the most famous and distinctive actors in the world, with his voice, sublime acting skills, earring, and white hair all combining to set him apart. Born in 1937, Morgan Freeman has won just about every accolade there is to win in the acting field, from an Oscar to a Golden Globe. Now, one fine evening on August 3, 2008, Freeman and a passenger were cruising in his 1997 Nissan Maxima when the vehicle had a rollover. The car was so damaged that both Freeman and his passenger had to be cut free before they could be taken to the hospital. Freeman's elbow, arm, and shoulder were broken, and on August 5th, doctors spent 5 hours taking care of the nerve damage in his arm and shoulder. That should have been the end of everything, but Freeman's passenger filed suit and claimed that he had crashed because he was drunk, with the suit later being settled out of court. And the accident also resulted in the Shawshank Redemption 1994 and Million Dollar Baby 2004 actor being afflicted with fibromyalgia. The accident and surgery that followed left him with a left hand that's less effective in all but name, and he wears a compression glove on it to forestall blood pooling there. He's also in very constant pain and cannot perform any kind of movement without being in agony. Freeman describes the pain as up and down the arm. That's where it gets so bad, excruciating. He can no longer do stuff he did before, like sail, ride horses, or fly jets. And here's to hoping a miracle finds him soon. What happened to these 15 forgotten actors? Click here to find out. See you there.